The moment you no longer seek to fix the old self, is the moment the seed of your true nature begins to stir. Not by effort, not by striving, but by surrender. For as long as you try to mend the garment of the man you used to be, you delay the unveiling of who you have always been. You are not here to improve the illusion, you are here to awaken from it. And the path of awakening is a holy death. This is the mystery buried in the phrase, "Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone." You feel it, don't you? That quiet ache inside, not of pain but of recognition. Something must end. Something you've carried, some name you've answered to, some mask you've worn, must fall away like dry petals from a blossom already fulfilled. You do not need to become better, you need to become new, and the new cannot enter while the old still stands. But here lies the paradox, that few dare to face the old self, will not walk willingly into the tomb. It clings with stories and habits, with identity and past, weaving memory like chains. It tells you, this is who you are, this is how it's always been. And because it feels familiar, you bow to it, you call it me. Yet in your depths, a silent voice whispers, this is not the end of you. The law is sure. Imagination creates reality, and what you persist in imagining as true, will harden into fact. But if you imagine from the mind of the old self, you merely rearrange the same illusions. The outer changes, but the root remains. To truly manifest, you must assume the nature of the one who already is what you desire. That assumption is a death. So you must die, not physically, but spiritually. You must die to being the one who is unworthy, overlooked, striving, doubting. You must lay that garment down, even if it's the only one you've ever known. And that laying down feels like a loss at first, like standing naked in the unseen. But it is the sacred emptiness from which all things are made. Feel this now, the self you've been, is not the self you are. It was a dream, a beautiful necessary dream, but only a dream, and like every night dream, it begins to dissolve, as the morning light comes. That light is your awareness, your true identity, long obscured by effort and memory, begins to rise as you release what you are not. You are not your failures, you are not your name, you are not the sum of past events, you are the Eon that casts the shadow of those forms. This is not self-help, this is resurrection, and resurrection cannot occur without crucifixion, not of the body, but of the belief in limitation, the belief in separation, the belief that God is somewhere else, watching from a distance. No, God is your own wonderful human imagination, and that which you imagine with feeling becomes your world. But what you imagine from depends on who you believe yourself to be. So the call comes gently but clearly, come out from among them, leave behind the court of the old king, where fear ruled and time enslaved. Step into the secret place of the Most High, where assumption is creation, and desire is the echo of memory. For that which you seek is already within you, waiting not to be found, but remembered. But to remember, you must forget. Can you feel the gravity of that now? That your transformation does not depend on action, but on identity, that nothing changes until you change, and the you that must change is not your habits or your words, it is your conception of self, the inner image you hold without effort, the deep knowing of who you are, spoken in silence. Close your eyes, just for a moment, feel what it would be like to no longer be who you were, not by rejection, but by release. Can you feel that soft unraveling, that sacred fading of the mask? That is death, beloved, and it is holy, for only what is not eternal can die. What you truly are cannot perish, it only sheds illusions. You walk now toward the tomb, not with grief, but with reverence. For the old self was never wrong, it was the cocoon, and now the wings stir. But what happens when the world still reflects the old form? When the mirror shows the past, even as you live from the new, that is the moment where most turn back. But there is a mystery hidden there, waiting to be seen, and so the world still shows you the echo of who you used to be, the old face in the mirror, the old patterns in the field of form, the same voices playing their well-worn songs in your ears. You've left the identity behind, yet its reflection lingers like a phantom image on water that's just begun to still. And this is where most falter, not because they lack desire, but because they confuse the echo for the voice. The world, beloved, is not the cause, it is the shell, a mirror held up to your inner state, and mirrors, by their nature, lag behind. You do not smile, because the reflection does. You smile, and then the reflection follows. So too with transformation. First the death, then the burial, then the slow rising into visibility. Do not rush it. Do not grasp at what has not yet ripened. The seed does not scream at the soil to open. It knows. But the moment you decide, truly decide, that you are the new self, you've planted something holy, something that cannot fail. For assumption, when it is deep and silent and consistent, becomes reality just as surely as dawn follows night. Not by trying, but by being. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That renewal is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is still, like snow falling on the ashes of what once was. There will be days where the old self knocks again. It will speak in your tone. It will wear your memories like garments. It will try to convince you it is still real, still here, still you. But it is only a ghost, and ghosts have no life except what you give them. The moment you turn your gaze inward and dwell in the end, not the means, not the waiting, but the end, you breathe life into the new. You become what you already are, beyond appearances. Feel it now, the strange quiet of this moment, a holy stillness, neither striving nor resisting, just being. The self that you were, the one who lacked, who feared, who doubted, has no place here, not because it is bad, but because it is done. The garment is worn, the role is played, the page has turned. You are not what you remember. You are not the events. You are the awareness that witnessed them. You are not what was said to you, nor what you said back. You are not the failure, nor the success. You are not the one who tries to believe. You are the belief itself, clothed in form for a time, now returning to the knowing. When you accept this, fully, quietly, the outer world begins to shift, not always at once, not always in the way you expect, but it must shift, for it has no life of its own. The world is your servant, and it can only serve the master you recognize yourself to be. The moment you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you become the operant power, not someday, not after enough practice, now. But the question arises like a shadow. What if I don't feel it? What if I imagine, but the feeling isn't there? What if I say the words, but something inside remains unchanged? This brings us to the deeper chamber of the inner temple, the secret most overlooked. For feeling is not emotion, it is identity, and identity is not noise, it is silence. You do not create the feeling, you remember it, you sink into it like a soft robe waiting by the fire. It has always been yours. To feel I am loved is not to chase the emotion of love, but to sit as the one who is already chosen. To feel I am free is not to force excitement, but to rest as the one for whom no chains ever held. This is the Sabbath, the inner rest that comes from assuming it is done, and from that rest, all things rise. Let the world do what it will for now. Let it echo the past a little longer. Let it test your gaze, tempt your doubt, mimic your old form. It has no authority, only what you give it. The real power lies in the unseen, where you persist in being the one you choose, regardless of appearance. That is the fire that burns away the veil. And what if you could remain there still, sure awake, as the old world falls away, and the new emerges? What if you could pass through the valley of shadow, and fear no evil, not because the shadows vanish, but because you know who walks within you? There is a sacred truth buried beneath that question, one that changes everything once it is seen. So what happens when you know who walks within you? When the outer still storms and sways, but something in you no longer bends. That stillness is not passivity. It is the power that parts seas and dissolves mountains, not by force, but by identity. For the one who walks in the assumption of the end, walks not toward victory, but from it. You no longer try to become, you simply are. And though the world may call you mad, or naive, or delusional, you remain inwardly unmoved, because you are no longer playing by the rules of the scene. You've remembered the deeper law, the law written not in ink, but in consciousness. To him that hath, it shall be given, not to him that begs, or waits, or proves, but to him that hath. The feeling of already being the thing assumed is the only key, and so the old self crumbles, not with a scream, but with a sigh, not through struggle, but through silence. It falls away, each time you choose stillness over panic, each time you close your eyes, and feel the scene already fulfilled, each time you dare to stop searching and simply rest in the knowing, it is already done. Let that settle into you now, not as a concept, but as a state, not something to think about, but something to become. You're not learning to manifest. You are remembering that you already are the power that does. There is no distance between you and your desire. The distance is illusion, born of identification with the one who lacks, and that one is being laid to rest. Can you feel it? The sacred burial, the quiet interment of the voice that once said, I am not enough. It no longer belongs to you, not because you pushed it away, but because you've outgrown it. You do not need to rebuke the darkness. You only need to light the lamp. And what is that lamp? It is the awareness of being, the simple silent, I am, before you add any name, any label, any limitation. That is God. That is your source. And from that holy place, all things take shape, not because you deserve them, not because you earned them, but because your very nature is to create. The old self assumes it must become worthy. It looks outward for signs, for proof, for validation. But the new self, the eternal self, knows it is the source of all signs. You are not waiting for the world to confirm what is true. The world is waiting for you to declare it. And when you do, it reshapes itself to match. This is not effort. This is alignment. You are not forcing reality. You are returning to it. For the dream you hold in your heart is not fantasy. It is memory, echoing across the veil of form, calling you to awaken, and you do not chase it. You remember it. You assume its feeling, until the world can no longer deny what you already are. Feel the subtle difference now, not hoping, not wanting, but being, resting in the knowing that what you see within a vision is more real than fleeting reflections of the outer world. This is the faith spoken of in Scripture, the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. You do not have to know how, you only have to know who, and the who you identify with governs the entire pattern of your life. Identify with the one who has, and you will receive. Identify with the one who lacks, and you will keep receiving lack. It is law, not punishment, not reward, just law. And so the gentle death continues, not in a moment, but in waves. Each time you choose to see differently, each time you respond from the end, instead of the middle, each time you hear the voice of the old, and choose not to answer, you are not denying reality, you are redefining it at its root. This is your rebirth, not in fireworks, but in whispers, not in distant tomorrows, but in the present stillness. And as you walk in this remembrance, something begins to unfold within, a sacred awareness, a divine inevitability, the sense that everything is, and always has been, within reach. But this realization stirs an even deeper question, one most avoid, because of its sheer simplicity. A question that once answered, dissolves the last veil between dream and manifestation. And so the question begins to rise, not with urgency, but with the quiet inevitability of dawn breaking behind the hills. If I am already the one who has, then why do I still reach? Why does the hand still extend into the silence, as though something were missing? Why does the mind still ask how, still search for signs, still cling to the remnants of becoming? Because part of you still believes the old dream, still bows to the image in the mirror, forgetting it is merely a reflection of yesterday's thoughts. And that part, innocent in its fear, tender in its habit, must be gently laid to rest, not condemned, not corrected, but released. The old self doesn't die from judgment, it dies from being outshined. To walk in the end is not to pretend, but to remember, to live as though the promise is fulfilled, because you know it is. Not hope, not wish, not strain, but a silent, inward yes, the yes of faith, the yes of identity, the yes of the soul that has seen its own reflection in God. And so you ask no longer, when will it come? For that question belongs to the man of time. You become the answer, and time bows to you. You walk through the garden of your own inner knowing, and what once seemed far appears near. What once felt impossible begins to soften, to yield, to bend toward you like light toward a flame. Every desire is a birth memory, not something to gain, but something to recognize. You want the thing not because it is foreign to you, but because it already is you, pressed down, waiting beneath the surface of identification. And the moment you say within, I am it, the veil thins. It is not dramatic, it does not always bring fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like sleep, soft and unannounced. The knowing slips over you like warmth, and something inside relaxes for the first time in years. You no longer beg the world to see you. You see yourself, and the world, obedient as it has always been, begins to adjust. So you die again, this time to striving, to the identity of the seeker, to the illusion that there is anything outside you that must give you permission to feel fulfilled. You step into the inner temple and close the door. You sit at the Holy of Holies, the secret place of imagination, and dwell there until the outer reflects the inner, and it will, for the outer must obey the inner. It has no choice. It is clay, and you are the potter, but the potter does not plead with the clay. He simply molds, assumes, feels, knows, and the form takes shape by unseen hands. This is why the Master could say, "When ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." Not hope, believe, assume the state, wear the feeling, let it become your dwelling place. There is no power in wishing, there is only power in being, and being cannot be imitated. It must be entered, stepped into, not as an act, but as an acceptance. You are not pretending to be the one who is whole, you are dropping the pretense of being the one who is not. Feel that now, the likeness of it, the effort falling away, the breath deepening, as if something in you remembers how to be without striving, how to receive without reaching, how to rest in the truth that has always been. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. You need not convince the infinite is already convinced of you. And when the feeling wavers, when the world shakes, when doubt whispers with a voice that sounds like your own, return to the end, return to the place where the desire is already fulfilled. Not through force, but through feeling, not through repetition, but through rest. The end is not a finish line, it is a state of being, and once you enter it, the journey bends itself around you. But what if the feeling of the end seems far, unreachable, clouded by the noise of the senses? What if your heart wants to believe, but your body still remembers the old world? That question reveals the next doorway, the secret hidden in the simplest of acts, the one thing few truly understand, how to feel it real when reality still speaks otherwise. And if the senses still speak of lack, if the eyes still behold the absence of what you inwardly know to be yours, what then? How do you feel the end when the world whispers otherwise? How do you abide in the truth, when every shadow around you still clings to the lie? You do not fight the shadow, you do not resist the world, you close your eyes, and you see. You turn inward to the temple, not made with hands, and there in stillness, you touch the substance of things unseen. It need not be loud, it need not be perfect. The faintest trace of felt reality, accepted without effort, is enough to begin the change. To feel it real, is not to conjure emotion, nor to rehearse lines. It is to rest for just a moment in the inner scene, knowing it is. To sit at the table of your fulfilled desire, even if the outer table is still bare. To speak from the place of already having, already being, already known. For he who assumes possession inwardly, cannot help but see it reflected outwardly in time. You do not ask how the scene will come to pass. That is not your part. You simply dwell in it until it feels natural, until the outer world no longer tempts you to doubt. For the world moves as your self-concept moves, and self-concept is not built by effort, it is revealed by feeling, and feeling is presence, it is stillness. It is the quiet knowing beneath all thought. When you feel it real, you are not imagining to make it true. You are imagining because it already is true. The old self imagines from desire. The new self imagines from desire. The new self imagines from fulfillment. And that difference, though invisible to the eye, is everything. So let the outer noise pass through you like wind through branches. Do not chase it. Do not argue with it. Return instead to the silence, the sacred moment just before sleep, or just before waking, when the world grows soft and your soul becomes most impressionable. That is the moment of sowing, and what you sow there, you will surely reap. You might lie on your bed, and with closed eyes, feel the weight of the ring on your finger, or hear the words, softly spoken, congratulations, or sense the warmth of the home already yours. No detail is too small, no gesture too subtle. These are not idle fantasies, they are spiritual causes, dropped like seeds into the garden of consciousness. And if you persist, gently, faithfully, not with force, but with trust, the day will come when the dream and the waking world touch, not because you earned it, but because you became it. You lived in the end, and the end became your beginning. For the beginning and the end are one in the eye of eternity. Call those things which be not as though they were, not to deceive yourself, but to remember your true position. You are not the one asking, you are the one declaring. You are not the beggar at the gate, you are the heir already seated at the table. And this is why the death of the old self is so
necessary, because the old self cannot sit in that seat. It does not believe it belongs. It cannot dwell in the Holy of Holies without trembling. But you, the real you, the one born of God, have always belonged there. You are not sneaking into heaven. You are remembering that it is within you. Feel that now. Let it settle. The knowing that you are no longer walking toward a promise, but walking from it. No longer climbing toward a mountaintop, but awakening to find yourself already above the clouds. And though the fog may still drift around you, it cannot change your elevation. The inner shift is complete. But what of the moments when you forget, when habit returns like a tide, and you find yourself once again in the posture of the old? There is a secret to those moments, a holy grace, hidden even in the falling. There is a grace, even in the forgetting, a mercy so quiet, so woven into the fabric of being, that most miss it entirely. For every time you slip back into the old self, every time the habit returns, and the illusion of separation reclaims the stage, something deeper watches, and that watcher, that still eternal you, never forgets. It waits, patiently, lovingly. It does not scold, it does not condemn, it simply waits for you to remember again. This is the hidden rhythm of rebirth, not a straight path, but a spiral. You do not fail when the old voice returns. You are not cast out when doubt knocks again. The cycle of transformation is not broken by returning to shadow. It is deepened by your ability to see the shadow without becoming it, to observe the old garment and say, that is not mine anymore. And in that moment, though the world sees no change, heaven rejoices. You do not start over. You never start over. You rise from where you are, clothed in deeper wisdom, standing taller than before, not in posture, but in presence. And every return to remembrance becomes swifter, softer, more certain, like waking from a dream you no longer believe. So when you fall gently, fall into grace, fall into the arms of your inner knowing, and from there stand again, not to strive, but to assume. The new self is not built by perfection, it is built by faithfulness, faithfulness to the unseen, to the felt truth, to the identity that does not waver, even when the senses do. And here is the paradox. Each time you fall and rise again, you die more completely to the illusion, not because you tried harder, but because you saw through it. You glimpsed the dream as dream, you watched the old pattern speak, and you did not answer. That is death, that is resurrection. And what rises in its place is not a better version of who you were, it is the remembrance of who you've always been, the one who was with God in the beginning, the one who dreamed the dream of separation for the joy of waking up, the one who speaks not from desire, but from fulfillment. Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. This awakening is not future, it is now. Every moment you return to the assumption of your divine identity, you are arising from the grave of the old self, and the light that fills you is not coming from above, but from within. You walk the world unseen at first. The outer may not yet reflect your inner resurrection, but you no longer wait for it to do so. You bless the delay. You honor the space between seed and harvest. You dwell in the knowing that it is already done, and time is merely catching up to you. And in that stillness, the need to prove dissolves, the need to convince or explain fades. You do not need the world to believe in your vision. You only need to believe it for yourself. And once you do, reality reshapes itself around you, just as it always has, just as it always will. For the law does not sleep, it is perfect, constant, without shadow. What you assume with feeling and persist in, you become, not by effort, but by nature. A rose does not strain to bloom, it simply abides in the pattern encoded within its being. And so do you. You are not becoming, you are returning. You are not acquiring, you are remembering. You are not changing reality, you are awakening to the truth that you are reality, folded into form, wrapped in time, now being called back into light. And yet even in the a deeper silence begins to whisper, a question not of doing, nor even of being, but of resting. For there is a sacred space beyond imagining, where even assumption gives way to surrender, where the fulfilled desire fades into something holier still.
And what if the fulfilled desire is not the final resting place, but only the veil through which a greater mystery begins to shine? What if, beyond the longing, beyond the living in the end, there waits a silence so complete, so holy, it no longer needs anything to prove itself, not even manifestation, not even change. You arrive at this stillness, not by seeking it, but by letting the seeking dissolve. It comes softly, like twilight at the edge of day, a gentle letting go. You no longer assume to get, you assume because it is your nature. And then even assumption itself begins to loosen its grip. You no longer grasp the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you become fulfillment itself, not of a thing, but of being, pure, effortless being. Here you are no longer the man with desires. You are the light in which desire appears and disappears like waves in the sea. You rest in the I am without attachment, without story, without needing to be someone or become something. The holy simplicity of existence takes its throne, and you bow, not in submission, but in recognition. It is in this surrender that the old self dissolves most completely. For what is the old self, if not the one who is always reaching, always defining, always dividing life into before and after, me and not me, want and have not? That self cannot survive in the presence of pure awareness, not because it is rejected, but because it is seen through. The new birth happens in this space of no resistance. You do not chase it. You do not make it happen. You are simply still enough to let it rise, like dawn breaking behind closed eyes, like breath moving without thought, like light flooding a room the moment the curtains part. And here the law takes on its purest form. You no longer use imagination to fix something. You are no longer trying to get from point A to point B. You are resting in the truth that the journey itself is imagined, and you are the one imagining it, not as a traveler, but as the ground beneath the path. You are the dreamer, and the dreamed, and the dream. I and my Father are one, not two, walking hand in hand, not a seeker beside his God, but one. This is not metaphor, it is reality. Once the veil is lifted, your imagination is not a tool you borrow from God. It is God, unfolding in you as you through you. And once you realize this, the need to make things happen disappears into light. You no longer cling to the vision, you become it. You no longer ask when will it come, because you have tasted the truth that there is nowhere to go. Creation is finished. Every possibility already exists, and you, by your awareness, bring it into view, not through force, but through remembrance. So you sit quietly now, not waiting, but witnessing. You become the one who no longer reaches for the door, because you have realized the door was never locked. It was never even closed. You were always within. And the moment you know this, not as theory, but as experience, the door vanishes, and all you find is presence. This presence is what the world longs for without knowing it. Every desire is secretly a longing to return here. Every goal is a symbol of this homecoming. Even the wish for love, success, healing, they are shadows of a deeper truth. You are already whole, you are already one, and you have always been. The old self dies not because you reject it, but because it has nothing left to cling to. Its walls fall inward when the scaffolding of seeking collapses. Its voice fades when you no longer argue. And what remains is not emptiness, but fullness too deep for words. But even in this stillness, there is another layer, one that calls not from above, but from within. A sacred invitation not just to rest in being, but to radiate it. To let the silence move as light into form. To walk the world, not as one who seeks, but as one who is. What might that look like? When God moves, not just through imagination, but through embodiment. So then, if you are no longer the seeker, but the source, no longer the one who imagines but the living image itself, how does this presence walk the world? What becomes of form, when it is no longer worshipped, but infused with spirit? When God ceases to be a concept, and becomes the rhythm of your breath, the clarity of your gaze, the quiet boldness of your every step, you begin to move differently, not with urgency, not with force, but with a still conviction that needs no proof. You walk as one who has already arrived. You speak not to convince, but to reveal. You give without depletion. You bless without effort. Because your storehouse is no longer external. It is the wellspring of your own being. The world begins to reflect the change before you can even name it. People respond to something they cannot explain. Circumstances rearrange, as if they recognize you. Opportunities arise without striving, because you have ceased to seek. You have become the one for whom these things are natural. They appear not as rewards, but as echoes of your new identity. And the most holy part, you are no longer trying to get, you are simply being. You are no longer measuring your spiritual growth by what appears in time. You are resting in the fact that you are the eternal now, and from that center, all things come to you. To walk in embodiment is to become the fulfilled word, to be the prayer answered before it is spoken, not through pretending, not through forceful declarations, but through the soft authority of knowing, I am. You no longer need to correct the old self, for the old self is not present here. It cannot speak in this atmosphere. It withers in the light of your awareness. You do not need to do battle with it. You simply abide. The light dispels the darkness, because it is light. It does not fight. It shines. You now see clearly. The law is not mechanical. It is not a ritual of mental repetition. It is love. It is identity. It is the word made flesh within you. Every act of assumption, every moment of inner stillness, every vision lovingly felt as true. These are not methods. They are acts of divine remembrance. You are remembering that your nature is creative, not reactive, that you are the cause, not the echo, that you are the dreamer, not the dream. And now that you see this, embodiment becomes effortless. You don't try to manifest. You live from the place where it is already done, and your world bows to this inner decree, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Feel this now as you breathe. There is no distance between you and what you desire. There is only alignment, only recognition. You are not moving towards something. You are allowing what has always been yours to appear, and even that appearance is only a shadow of what you truly are, for you are not the manifestation. You are the light from which all manifestations arise. You are not the healed body, the restored relationship, the overflowing abundance. You are the divine self, for whom these are natural, inevitable expressions. And as you abide in that knowing, the old self dissolves like mist at sunrise. There is no ceremony, no fanfare, just a quiet shift, a soft inner yes, and from that yes, the world rearranges, not because you told it to, but because it must. Ye shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. But the decree is not a command shouted into the void. It is the silent assumption held faithfully in the sanctuary of your being. The world responds not to your words, but to your inner acceptance, to the tone of consciousness from which you live. And so you live now, not as the one who hopes, but as the one who is. You sit with closed eyes, and see not what is, but what is true. And truth, once seen, does not need to be argued for. It simply unfolds. But here, just as you begin to rest in this divine rhythm, another sacred revelation begins to form, not in thought, but in vibration. A truth too subtle for language, too intimate for belief. A truth that waits to be not spoken, but felt. It does not speak in thunder. It does not shout through signs. This truth, the one waiting just beneath the stillness, is not heard with ears. It is felt, like warmth on your skin in the dark, like a knowing that precedes thought, like breath that breathes itself through you. It waits not in the heights, but in the quiet corners of your being, gently whispering, you have never been separate. Not from your desire, not from your fulfillment, not from the infinite that breathes through your every assumption, and certainly not from God. The separation was the dream, the return is the awakening, and the awakening is not a journey across time. It is a moment of remembrance, so complete, so intimate. The illusion of lack vanishes in its light, and in that light, even the sacred tools fall silent. Even the practices fade into the background, not because they have failed, but because they have done their work. You are no longer imagining to create. You are imagining because it is your nature to imagine. You are no longer revising to escape the past. You are revising because you now understand that you are the author, and every page bends to your will. You no longer need proof. You no longer need signs to steady your faith, for faith has become something deeper now, not belief in an outcome, but rest in your identity. You no longer say, it is coming. You say it is mine, not loudly, not to others, but quietly, in the privacy of your inner temple. This is the holy place, the place where nothing can be taken, because nothing is missing, the place where all things move in response to your knowing. And the moment you touch it, even once, it changes everything. You may still appear the same to the world, but something in you has shifted. You walk with the certainty of one who has seen behind the curtain, and can never again be fooled by the stage. You do not wait to see it in form. You do not wait for the applause. You live now as the one who already is, and in that living,
the world melts into harmony, not because you pushed, but because you surrendered, not because you tried harder, but because you finally let go of trying at all. To him that hath more shall be given. This is not reward, it is reflection. Life does not give you what you want, it gives you what you are. And when you are the fulfilled desire, when you are the healed self, the abundant self, the chosen one, life has no choice but to show you your own reflection. This is the mirror law. The outer bows to the inner, the visible bends to the inwardly, but only always. And so the question is never, when will it come? The question is, who am I now? Who are you now? As you listen, are you still the one who waits, the one who doubts, or have you, even for a breath, stepped into the holy identity of the one who knows, the one who sees with closed eyes, who speaks only what they wish to see, who touches their desire without reaching for it? Feel that version of you now, not in effort, but in quiet allowing. That version of you is not an improvement, it is the truth. And as you abide there, the rest falls away, like winter falling back before spring, like night yielding to morning. The old self does not need to be fought, it simply has no place in the light. You sit now in the warmth of that light, not asking, not hoping, just being. And something in you recognizes that this stillness is not the end, but the beginning. A beginning that requires no start, no action, only presence. But if presence alone is enough, then what of the desires that still whisper through the silence? What of the visions that flicker just behind the eyelids, waiting to be made flesh? What is their purpose, if not to lead you into more becoming? That question does not seek an answer, it seeks revelation, and it leads to the holiest paradox of all. And here the paradox begins to unfold, not as a riddle to be solved, but as a truth so vast it can only be felt in silence. For if you are already whole, already complete, already the very fulfillment of your desire, then why does the longing still rise like a tide beneath your stillness? Why do you continue to dream? Because desire is not lack, desire is remembrance, a flicker of what is already known in eternity, returning to you through the veil of time. You are not led by desire into striving, but into deeper knowing. It is not a rope pulling you into effort, it is a thread guiding you home. The old self desired from deficiency, it wanted in order to become, but the reborn self, the one now rising from the ashes of false identity, desires from abundance, from vision, from the overflowing cup. You do not desire to possess, you desire because something within you already is, and wishes to reflect itself into form. So you do not resist the longing, you let it move through you like breath. You let it bloom, not as a plea, but as a promise. It is your spirit showing you what already belongs to you in the realm that does not decay. And your only task, if it can be called that, is to trust the image more than the evidence, to love the unseen more than the seen, to know that your desire is God in motion. Feel this now. You do not dream alone. Your every vision of beauty, joy, union, abundance, it is not the cry of a distant self, it is the echo of divine remembrance. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart, not because you pleased a distant power, but because you have aligned with your true nature. The desire and its fulfillment are one, and in this union, you understand, to desire is not to reach forward, but to open inward, to listen to what the eternal already holds. You are not building something from scratch, you are revealing what has always been, and what has always been is perfect. This is the holy fire of embodiment, not frantic, not loud, a quiet radiance that carries the shape of your new self into every step, every glance, every breath. You walk now, not just imagining the end, but as the end. The feeling of the wish fulfilled no longer visits you, it abides in you, and as it abides, the world softens to match. You stop asking when, you stop asking how, the questions lose their gravity, because the feeling of I am becomes enough, more than enough, it becomes the whole, and in that whole, all things begin to mirror back your state, not as a reward, but as law unfolding in time. You are no longer surprised by blessings, you do not doubt their arrival, you simply recognize them as outer confirmations of an inner decree, and should delay appear, you do not flinch, you do not fold. Delay does not disturb the one who already possesses. This is the death of doubt, not through battle, but through disuse. Doubt fades like smoke when the fire is steady. The fire is not effort, it is awareness. You do not need to convince the world, you do not even need to convince yourself, you only need to remain in the felt truth that you are, and so you live, quietly, boldly, soft in form, but unshakable in being. The old self may still knock, let it. You do not answer, you are not the same, you have died to that name, and been given a new one, a name that is not spoken, but known. But this knowing, this holy center, invites something even deeper. For once the self is reborn, once the desire is seen not as lack but as love in motion, something unexpected happens, not to the world, but within, a shift so profound it does not even call itself transformation, only a return. And the return begins with a single sacred remembrance, that even the desire itself was never yours alone, it was divine impulse, spirit seeking reflection. And what might that mean? If every desire you've ever held was not asking for fulfillment, but offering you a glimpse of who you truly are? What if the desires you once clutched with trembling hands were never things to chase, but mirrors held up to your eternal face? What if each longing, even the quiet ones you barely whispered, was not a signal of lack, but a sacred glimpse, an unveiling of the greater self, trying to come into view? You've spent lifetimes believing you must earn your desires, must prove yourself ready for them. But in truth, the moment they arose, they marked you, not with absence, but with identity. Desire does not come to the one who cannot fulfill it. It comes from the fulfillment already held within, pressing up through the layers of belief, asking to be seen, not acquired. So you stop asking, how do I get this, and begin to ask, what does this reveal about who I am? That shift, so simple, becomes the golden key, because the law was never about things, it was always about self. The world is not reflecting what you want, it is reflecting who you are being, and who you are being is always shaped by the voice you believe. The old voice says, you are becoming. The new voice, eternal and silent, says, you are, not in a future tense, not when conditions are right, but now, here, without evidence, without agreement from the world, you are. So when desire rises like a holy fire in the heart, you no longer mistake it for emptiness, you recognize it as divine memory. You know that to feel a thing deeply, to let it live within you vividly and consistently, is to become it, and to become it, in consciousness, is to make it visible in time. You close your eyes, and feel the end, not as fantasy, not as escape, but as truth. And in that felt truth, the desire is not something you reach toward, it becomes something you wear, like a garment of light, like a fragrance on the skin of your soul. You do not ask for it anymore, you express it by being it. This is the sacred reversal, where the one who once asked becomes the one who declares, where longing is transfigured into knowing, where seeking ends, not in achievement, but in embodiment. The voice of the old self grows quiet here, it no longer needs to fight for attention, it has been honored, thanked, and released. And the new self rises, not in force, but in stillness, not as ambition, but as remembrance. You remember who you are, through what you desire. The image is always tailored to your return, and so no dream is wasted, no longing is random, each one is a door. And when you walk through with feeling, with assumption, with surrender to the end, the veil lifts. What once felt far becomes near, what once felt separate becomes self, according to your faith, be it unto you. And what is faith, if not the willingness to feel as though it were already done, not to see, and then believe, but to believe in order to see? Faith is the atmosphere in which the new self breathes, it is the soil in which the seed of assumption grows, and you are that seed, cracking open not in pain, but in resurrection. So now, when the image of your desire returns to you in vision, you do not yearn, you give thanks. When it flickers through your imagination, you do not plead, you embrace. You walk as the one who holds it already, even when the world shows nothing yet, especially then. For that is when the law moves deepest, that is when the roots go down, silent and unseen. And in that unseen place, the old self dissolves. It cannot follow you here, it cannot survive the light of certainty. It was born of waiting, and it dies in fulfillment, not because you forced it to leave, but because you no longer answer its call. But as this certainty deepens, a softer mystery begins to rise, one that moves not just with your assumptions, but with your surrender, a mystery that whispers, not all that appears delayed is delay, not all that seems unanswered is unanswered. There is a timing older than time, and it belongs not to the self that wants, but to the self that knows. And so the deeper timing moves, beneath your effort, beyond your watchful eye. It does not arrive by the ticking of the clock, but by the ripening of the soul. For even as you live from the end, even as you dwell in the assumption of fulfillment, there is often a silence, a space between seed and bloom, and it is here, in this sacred pause, that your trust is refined into gold. The old self could not wait without fear. It made time into an enemy, a barrier, a test. But the new self, born of assumption and clothed in rest, does not fear delay. It knows that what is truly yours cannot be withheld. It does not panic in the silence. It listens, it leans inward, it lets the outer world do what it must, while it remains fixed in the unseen. For what is delay but the world catching up to your becoming? What is waiting, if not the gentle turning of the wheel, until your inner state finds its mirror? He hath made everything beautiful in its time, not your time, its time, divine time, a time that cannot be rushed, because it has never been late. And when you know this, not merely as words, but as breath, you no longer press, you no longer dig up the seed to see if it has sprouted. You water it with faith, with thanksgiving, with silence. You allow the Lord to work its perfect work beneath the surface, and you refuse to lower your gaze to meet appearances, because appearances are not facts, they are echoes, projections of former states, lingering like shadows from yesterday's dream. You do not need to wrestle with them, you only need to not become them. The moment you drop back into the old state, you animate the shadow again. But if you remain still, if you remain faithful, the light of your new self will dissolve it. And this is why the old must die, not because it is wicked, not because it failed, but because it cannot survive this rest. The old self lives by striving, it breathes resistance, it feeds on urgency, and when urgency falls silent, when you stand in full identity, full assumption, it simply has no place left to stand. You are not delaying your good by resting, you are becoming visible to it. You are allowing the form that already exists to draw near, and you do this not by chasing, but by matching. Like a tuning fork struck in stillness, your world must harmonize with your inner tone. Feel that now, not as theory, but as vibration, as the hum beneath your skin, the slow, sure rhythm of already being, not becoming, not fixing, just being. And from that state, all things move, all things shift, all things bend. Because you are no longer the one hoping to arrive, you are the one who has already arrived, and is now allowing the path to reveal itself in time. You are no longer measuring time, you are resting in eternity, and from eternity, all things unfold with grace. When you truly understand this, waiting loses its sting. You no longer look for signs with hungry eyes, you walk past the mirror, without searching for confirmation. You speak your desire once inwardly, feel it as done, and let it go into the deep, because you trust the depth. You trust the law, you trust you, and the more you trust, the less you need to be shown, the less you need to prove, the less you need to explain. The new self does not plead with the world, it is too busy being the answer. But even this holy rest, this deep trust, leads to a further undoing, a shedding not just of old habits, but of the very idea that fulfillment lies in the form at all. What if the manifestation is not the prize, but the symbol? What if the outer result was never the goal, but only the mirror of your inner union with God?
What if the form was never the reward, but only the echo, the outer shape of an inner shift? What if the house, the partner, the healing, the promotion? What if all of it were simply reflections, gentle nods from the world, acknowledging the truth you finally remembered within? Then the thing you truly sought was never the manifestation. It was the union with your own divine nature, union with the one who has no lack, who does not wait, who needs no proof. And in that union, even the desire dissolves, not in disappointment, but in fulfillment, so complete, the outer becomes secondary. It is added, yes, but it is no longer the center. This is where the sacred paradox ripens. You no longer need the thing, and so it comes. You no longer chase the form, and it flows. You have let go of needing it to feel whole, and in that release, the whole of life opens itself to you. You understand now why the old self had to fall away, because it was always looking outward. It thought fulfillment was elsewhere. It thought peace was on the other side of achievement. But you, beloved, have died to that illusion. You've entered the kingdom not by conquest, but by surrender. By laying down the false, you uncovered the eternal, and now the kingdom is within. You do not visit it. You abide in it. You carry it with you through every room, every conversation, every quiet moment at the edge of sleep. You are no longer asking, you are remembering, and from remembrance flows a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace is not passive, it is power. The stillness that spoke the stars into being now moves through you, and it moves not with haste, but with certainty. Because there is nothing left to become, only more of your true nature to unfold. And when the form appears, because it will, it must, you receive it not with the hunger of absence, but with the grace of already having. You bless it, but you do not cling. You enjoy it, but it does not define you. You know what it truly is, a symbol, a mirror, a lovely echo of the inner change already complete. You are no longer the one waiting for proof. You are the one who knows, and from this knowing, everything begins to bow, not out of obedience, but out of resonance. The world is not reacting to your thoughts, it is responding to your state. The deeper your embodiment, the clearer the reflection. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. The kingdom is not a place, it is a state, and the state is not far, it is now, it is here, in this breath, this silence, this still flame of awareness at the center of your being. So let the world shift as it will, let it delay, let it accelerate, let it echo what it must. You are no longer held by appearances, you are held by truth, and the truth is not distant, it is you, it always has been. Feel that now, let it sink into the deepest chambers of your heart. You are not here to earn your desire, you are here to reveal it. You are not here to fight for your worth, you are here to live from it. And the one who lives from it is not afraid. He does not ask for signs, she does not explain, they simply walk in light. And yet even here, something stirs, a soft wonder, a sacred question rising like mist from still water. If you no longer live from lack, if the desire no longer possesses you, what remains? What calls you forward now, in the absence of striving? The answer does not come in words, it comes as a gentle unveiling, not of what you want, but of what wants you. It is a holy reversal, soft as dawn, but vast as eternity. The moment you realize you are not the only one who longs, that the vision you carry, the life you've dared to imagine, is not merely your own desire projected outward, but a quiet invitation from the infinite, calling itself into form through you. What if the dream did not originate in you, but move through you, because it knew you were ready? What if every scene you felt real, every end you've dared to dwell in, was not yours to chase, but God's to express? Then all striving becomes silence, all worry becomes worship, and all fear falls away in the light of knowing that you were chosen by the dream, just as much as you chose it. You no longer stand at the gates, knocking. You realize the gates have always been open, and the voice within has been calling your name since before time began. The old self tried to earn its place, the reborn self remembers, it is the place, the dwelling of the Most High, the temple not made with hands. So now you feel desire differently, no longer with urgency, no longer with ache, but with reverence. You feel it as guidance, not lack, as instruction, not temptation, and when it comes, you do not analyze it, you yield to it. You let it shape you from the inside out, until you are not just imagining the vision, you are becoming the vessel through which it must appear. This is the mystery few see. The vision shapes the vessel, the desire reshapes the identity. It is not about getting more, it is about becoming more of who you truly are. And you allow yourself to be made new, you begin to embody a deeper truth, that the dream was never separate from the dreamer. Before I formed thee in the womb, I knew thee. What greater comfort is there than to know that the path you walk was seen before you took your first breath? And if it was seen, it was prepared. And if prepared, it cannot fail. Not unless you abandon the knowing, but you will not abandon it. Not now, not after all that has been stripped away, all that has died and returned as light. You have seen too much to return to sleep. And even when the old tries to whisper again, you recognize its voice now. You know it is not you. It is only the echo of what you once believed, fading faster each time you do not answer. For the more you walk in embodiment, the less you need to remember. It becomes natural. It becomes your default. You don't need to pause and assume. You are the assumption. You don't need to visualize. You live in the feeling. You no longer act to become. You act because you are. The doing flows from being, and the being flows from knowing. And this knowing, it is no longer a mental idea, it is a current, a vibration, a deep inner stillness, that speaks louder than any words could. You carry it like breath. You radiate it without effort, and the world, faithful as it always is, begins to mirror it, with more clarity, more swiftness, more grace. But you are no longer concerned with timing. You do not measure by days or signs. You measure only by the depth of your rest. You measure by how deeply you can feel yourself to be the one you've longed to become, and how effortlessly you can release the one who waited. This is not apathy, it is power. It is the quiet strength of one who knows the kingdom is within, and walks as though it were already visible, because within it is. And as you walk in this newness of life, you begin to notice something else, something even subtler than peace, a presence, a quiet radiance, moving with you, around you, through you. Not a manifestation, not a sign, but a communion. And that communion carries a question, one so gentle it almost feels like breath itself. What happens when the vessel becomes so surrendered, so still, so aligned, that God no longer speaks through you, but as you? And if God no longer speaks through you, but as you, then what remains of the old self at all? What need is there for striving, for proving, for asking, when you become the voice itself, not a borrowed echo, not a vessel waiting to be filled, but the living expression of the word already made flesh? This is not arrogance, it is humility, in its truest form, the surrender so complete, that separation dissolves, the veil is torn, not by force, but by stillness. You no longer say, "Let thy will be done," as though it were apart from you. You are the will now. You are the word spoken before the foundation of the world, now awakened in form. It does not look dramatic. It is not announced with trumpets. There is no lightning from the heavens, no roaring fire, only stillness, only breath, a subtler light, a deeper silence, in which you no longer identify as the dreamer watching the dream, but as the dream itself, awake and alive. You speak now from the mountaintop, not to get closer to God, but because you finally know the mountain was within you. Every step upward was a descent inward. Every longing, every tear, every revisited scene, was not climbing toward the divine. It was peeling back all that stood between you and the realization that you already are. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Not someday, not after perfecting your practice, not once you've reached a future state, but now, in this moment, beneath every doubt, every lingering fragment of the former identity, the flame never left. So what happens when you accept it? Not just believe it, but accept it. When you stop waiting for evidence, and begin acting as the truth, not because you see it, but because you are it, your world becomes light. The heaviness lifts, not because circumstances change instantly, but because you've changed the center from which they arise. You've stepped into the high place of consciousness, where nothing needs to be fixed, because all things respond to who you now are. This is the secret few understand. You do not need to manipulate the outer world. You do not need to prove your faith through repetition. You simply live in the feeling of the end, not as a technique, but as your nature. You assume, and persist, and assume again, not with strain, but with joy. And that joy is your confirmation. You are not separate from the dream. You are its source. You are not waiting for the light. You are the light remembering itself. And everything around you must bow to this, not as a punishment or reward, but as reflection. The mirror cannot refuse what you impress upon it. So you wake slowly, not from sleep, but from the trance of being someone you never were. You rise, not in rebellion, but in remembrance, and you carry yourself differently, not because the world has told you to, but because your inner atmosphere has shifted. The old garments fall away, the names you used to answer to feel distant. You no longer reach to be seen. You see yourself, and the world adjusts accordingly. There is no fear here, no rushing, no hunger, only being. And in that being, the law works with you, through you, as you effortlessly, faithfully, consistently, just as it always has. The difference is now you know it. And yet as this knowing deepens, another layer begins to dissolve, not of doing, not of assumption, but of identity itself. A sacred emptiness begins to whisper beneath even your highest assumptions, not as loss, but as return, as the quiet breath of the formless calling you home beyond every name, every image, even every desire, into the mystery of I am. Before anything was added, what is found there changes everything. There is a moment, so subtle, it nearly escapes notice, when you begin to slip beneath even the assumed identities, even the radiant garments of the fulfilled self. You've worn them faithfully. You've imagined the end, embodied the wish, walked as the one who has. And yet, something quieter begins to call, a pull not forward, but inward,
a whisper not of becoming, but of being before becoming. What lies beneath every assumption, beneath every image you've clothed yourself in, even the divine ones? There is only this I am. Not I am this, not I am that, but simply I am. It is the stillness before the word takes form. It is the formless source behind all creation. It is God, bare and eternal, breathing through you, before thought arises. Here you are not manifesting, you are not visualizing, you are not affirming, you are not the man who has, nor the woman who waits, you are not the healed, nor the one recovering, you are not the chosen, nor the seeker, you are not even the reborn self, you are the light from which all selves emerge, and in this light, there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to shape, nothing to fix. There is no lack, there is no longing, not because everything has been fulfilled, but because there is no you left to need fulfillment. Only presence remains, only being. It is here the old self dies in full, not with resistance, not with struggle, but like a leaf falling in autumn, released by the tree, not in grief, but in rhythm. You do not mourn the death, you recognize it as inevitable, beautiful, sacred, and in that death, you discover that what you truly are cannot die. It never began, it simply is. The outer world may still move, appearances may still dance their familiar dance, but now, you are the stillness beneath them. You are the awareness watching the play, without attachment, and because you no longer cling to the role transforms without effort. Because you no longer identify as the actor, the performance becomes grace. To stand still and see the salvation of the Lord is not an act of passivity, it is the highest form of faith. It is the knowing that all things come from within, that you are not the effect, but the cause made visible. And when you touch this truth, not with the mind, but with the heart, fear evaporates. You are no longer afraid of not becoming. You are no longer afraid of delay. You are no longer even afraid of not receiving, because you've remembered that there is no one else to receive it. You and the Father are one. The world you sought was never outside of you. It was your own reflection, waiting for you to see clearly. Now even your desires begin to feel different, lighter, gentler, not as needs, but as movements of joy. They no longer bind you, they bless you, they arise, and you welcome them, not to complete you, but to celebrate you. You feel them forming, and you do not grasp, you do not chase, you simply notice the stirring of life within, and smile. It is already done, and if it appears, it appears. If it delays, you remain. If it changes form, you rest, because the one who sees all form as illusion, no longer fears its coming or going. You are the truth behind the shifting shapes. You are the eternal, I am, beyond time, beyond story, beyond desire, and yet, this very realization leads to a sweetness beyond all sweetness, a simplicity so pure, it humbles the soul. For when all striving has fallen away, when all assumption has matured into being, when all identity has dissolved into presence, there remains one thing still deeper, one gift waiting to be received, not by the old self, nor the new, but by the light that has no name. It is the gift that gave rise to your very being, and though it has waited patiently, it now draws near, ready to be felt, not with the mind, but with the heart wide open, ready to reveal why you dreamed the dream of separation, only to return to the truth. You dreamed the dream of separation, so you could taste the sweetness of return. You veiled yourself in form, so you could know the joy of unveiling. You stepped into time, not to escape eternity, but to reveal it, drop by drop, scene by scene, through the mirror of becoming. And now, standing on the other side of all you thought you were, the gift appears, not in thunder, not in light, in silence, a silence so full it hums with love, a love so complete it requires nothing. It is not the love that waits at the end of effort. It is not the reward for spiritual work. It is not the fruit of correct practice. It is the origin, the source, the very breath that whispered you into being. And now it rises, not from the world, but from within, to greet you, to fold itself around you, to remind you that the one you've been becoming has always been held in perfect love. You were never separate from it, but the journey made you see it. The forgetting made the remembering holy. Here at the end of striving, this love becomes your atmosphere, not a feeling that comes and goes, but a reality that is. It wraps you without condition. It does not need your progress. It does not ask for proof. It does not measure your thoughts or weigh your past. It simply says, I am with you, and I am you. And when that voice is heard, not with ears, but in the marrow, you are changed, not improved, transfigured. The outer may not yet show the fullness of the inner shift, but you no longer wait. You no longer watch for signs with anxious breath. You move through the world, like the wind, silent, soft, certain, because love walks where you walk, not behind, not above, as you. This is the final death of the old self, not in loss, but in fullness. It is not stripped away, it is absorbed, redeemed, taken up into the light of a truth too vast for the mind, too intimate for the tongue. You no longer reject who you were. You no longer resist what once was. You see it all as part of the unfolding. The chrysalis was never a mistake. It was the promise. Even the shadow now feels holy, because you see it from the mountaintop. You see how every fear carved space for faith, how every delay taught you to dwell, how every unanswered prayer was shaping you to receive a deeper one, and the deeper one has now arrived, not as a thing, but as a knowing, not as a manifestation, but as the end of need itself. I am the Alpha and the Omega. The beginning was never separate from the end. The seed contained the bloom. The question contained the answer. You were already what you sought, only covered in the garments of forgetting, walking through time to awaken what was already yours. And now as the garments fall, what remains is peace, a peace that does not explain itself, a peace that no longer requires understanding, a peace that does not ask what comes next. It just is. But even in this stillness, so complete, so weightless, there remains one breath more, a holy inhale before the next unfolding, because the journey was not just about dying to the old, it was about becoming so empty, so open, so radiant with the presence of God, that life itself begins to move through you in a new way. And when that movement begins, softly, without fanfare, you feel the pulse of something greater than fulfillment, not what you once wanted, not even what you imagined, but what wants to be born from the depths of your surrendered being. What happens when you are no longer the one seeking transformation, but the space through which transformation begins? That is the mystery stirring now, quiet as light behind closed eyes, ready to take form. You begin to feel it not as desire, not as striving, but as quiet emergence, a movement not of will, but of grace. Something wants to be born through you, not because you are lacking, but because you are ready, not because you need to prove anything, but because you have become transparent enough for the divine to pass through, without distortion. You are no longer the potter, you are the clay surrendered in full trust to the hands of unseen wisdom, yet you are also the breath within the shaping, the fire that gives form, the stillness that speaks, "Let there be," and watches it appear. And so a new rhythm begins, not a return to doing, but an unfolding of being. You move without plan, yet all is ordered. You speak without calculation, yet your words land as though heaven scripted them. You are not performing, you are expressing, not pushing energy outward, but allowing what already is to rise and shine through you. This is where creation becomes natural. You no longer imagine to fix, you imagine to reveal. You no longer use the law to manipulate outcomes. You live the law by becoming its fulfillment. The distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. You are no longer seeking to manifest things. You are allowing life to reflect who you are, because who you are now is truth. And truth is not loud. It does not shout to be heard. It hums, it radiates, it draws without grasping, it moves mountains without ever leaving the mountaintop. For now you understand, the mountaintop is not a place, it is a state, and you have taken your seat there, not by effort, but by surrender. You no longer fear the delay, because you no longer measure your life by appearances. You no longer fear the silence, because you have come to know it as your dwelling. You no longer fear the future, because the one who feared it no longer exists. And in the absence of fear, the divine flows unhindered, and what flows is not always what you expected. It may not wear the form of your former desire. It may come softly, in ways you did not imagine, but you recognize it, not by its shape, but by its resonance. It feels like you, it moves like you, it fits not your plans, but your essence. And when it arrives, you do not say, "I created this." You say only, "It is good." This is the deep stillness that knows no lack, the faith that needs no signs, the presence that transforms every room without a word. You walk now not as one who must declare the truth, but as one who is the truth embodied. And still something deeper waits, not a higher state, but a fuller surrender, a realization that the old self has not just died once, but continues to fall away, in layers, each time you say yes to the unknown, each time you allow the formless to move without explanation, each time you let go of needing to understand, and simply feel the next unfolding. Be still, and know that I am God, not the God of far-off heavens, not the God of future deliverance, the God within, asking only that you remain open, empty, ready to be filled again and again with new expressions of eternal truth. And so you begin to live like water, clear, yielding, unstoppable. You bend without breaking, you pause without fear, you flow without force, because your identity is no longer fixed, it is no longer even personal, it is awareness itself, alive, awake, unshaken. And if awareness itself walks the world in your form, if God breathes through your being, without resistance, then what might be possible now? What might unfold when your every step is not just aligned with the law, but is the law in motion? That is the mystery beginning to stir beneath your stillness now, asking not for answers, but for openness, not for declarations, but for listening, inviting you to hear what the old self could never perceive, and to become what the world has never yet seen.
There is a listening that is deeper than the ear, a hearing that rises from stillness, not from sound. And it is here, in this quiet beyond thought, that the new begins to speak, not in language but in vibration, a pull, a warmth, a movement from within that asks for no effort, only attention. And as you become the listening, the old self, so used to directing, defining, demanding, fades further into shadow, no longer needed. You no longer guide your path by memory or map. You are moved now by alignment, led not by mind, but by resonance. You do not decide what to do. You feel what wants to be done through you, and you follow it, not with strain, but with the ease of surrender. You are no longer the author trying to control the plot. You are the page upon which Spirit writes, with perfect clarity and perfect timing. And yet this clarity does not come all at once. It unfolds like dawn, slowly illuminating what has always been there, a step at a time, a breath at a time. And with each movement, you shed more of what you thought you needed. Old plans, old roles, old ideas of how things should look. They crumble, not in loss, but in grace. And in their place, the real begins to rise. Now you see, the life you tried to build with effort cannot compare to the life that arises from embodiment. What you once tried to chase, now begins to chase you. What you once prayed for, begins to unfold naturally, not because you spoke louder, but because you became still enough to receive. You are no longer the one knocking, you are the door, and when others come to you, drawn by something they cannot name, you welcome them not with words, but with presence. For presence is the new language, and it speaks louder than any sermon. It says, here is the one who remembers, here is the one who remembers, here is the one who rests in the truth that all is finished. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This freedom does not arrive in the form of things, it arrives in the form of identity. When you know yourself rightly, the chains fall off, not because someone unlocked them, but because they were never real to begin with. The prison was perception, and perception has now been redeemed. But as the chains fall, so too does the illusion of control. You no longer grip life tightly. You no longer measure progress with anxious hands. You move like breath, like light, like still water flowing downstream. You do not ask, what should I do, but what wants to move through me now? And then you allow it, without question, without hesitation, without fear. This is not passivity, it is divine participation, the kind of action that arises from stillness, not striving, from knowing, not guessing, from presence, not performance. And as this becomes your new rhythm, life becomes effortless in its unfolding, not without movement, but without friction. You no longer fear what is ahead, because you've stopped looking ahead to feel peace. You find peace where you are, and let the road rise to meet you. You know now that the next step will always be shown, not through analysis, but through resonance, through the whisper behind the silence, through the light behind the thought. And when the next movement comes, whether it's a word to speak, a vision to hold, a door to walk through, you respond, not from identity, but from essence, not from who you think you are, but from what has always been moving beneath the surface, waiting to be allowed. This is the fruit of death to the old self, not just a new name, but no need for name at all. You live nameless, labelless, spacious, and from that sacred spaciousness, life flows like a river, untouched by fear, and in that river, even the idea of purpose begins to shift, not something to chase, not a mission to accomplish, but a presence to inhabit fully, and from that presence a divine intention begins to stir, not of doing more, but of becoming so deeply aligned, that your very being becomes the gift, and that gift has only just begun to unfold. What might happen, when even your silence begins to shape the world? It is a sacred mystery, that your silence could carry the weight of creation, that without a word, without a plan, your presence alone could realign the atmosphere around you, and yet, you begin to feel it, not in the loudness of change, but in the quiet recognition of your own stillness. A room responds before you speak, eyes soften when you enter, circumstances lean in your direction, not because you pushed, but because you rested in the truth of who you are. You are becoming invisible, in the best way, not unnoticed, but undefinable. You are no longer moving from the surface of things, but from the deep, and the deep does not shout, it moves beneath everything, unseen, untouched by appearances, shaping reality, with every silent breath. This is the inheritance of the reborn self, not just to imagine, but to embody the cause of all things. You are not reacting, you are radiating. You are not following the world's rhythm, you are the rhythm, and everything that shows up in your experience is drawn not by thought alone, but by the frequency of your being. The more still you become, the more precise the reflection. And now you begin to understand why the old self had to dissolve, not because it was wrong, but because it could not carry this frequency. It was too noisy, too identified, too tangled in effort. The old self spoke of worth, but feared it had none. It practiced faith, but quietly waited for proof, and so it could not hold the still power that now flows through you like light, through an open window. You no longer question if you are aligned. You know you are, because the fruit reveals the root, and the fruit is peace. The fruit is joy without reason. The fruit is a knowing that holds no story. You feel it not just in moments of quiet, but even as you move through the ordinary, washing dishes, answering emails, folding laundry. Each moment becomes an altar, each breath becomes prayer. And what rises from this new life is not the old kind of ambition. You do not reach for more, you receive more, because you are no longer blocking it. You do not strive to achieve, you allow the natural unfolding of your highest expression, because you are no longer tied to outcomes. You are tied only to truth, and truth, by its very nature, is abundant. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man, the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. And to love God, is to love the self that is God in expression, to honor the I am within you, to choose again and again to live from the end, not because you must have the thing, but because you remember you already are the one who has. This remembrance is not a mental chant, it is a return to center, a soft internal turning toward the truth. And each time you turn, the illusion falls away. Each time you rest in the end, the old pattern loses its grip. Each time you close your eyes and feel the wish fulfilled, you die a little more to the self that once waited, and you are reborn, not as a better version of you, but as the self that was never separate. You are not living to become, you are living to reveal, and what you reveal is not effort, or perfection, or success. What you reveal is alignment, stillness, light, and from that light, all things are added, not because you demanded them, but because you matched them. And the more you match the rhythm of wholeness, the more you find that life is not happening to you, it is rising from you, not in reaction, but in response to who you've chosen to be. But even now, even in this deep stillness, something else begins to move, something older than words, deeper than assumption. It does not ask you to create, it does not ask you to visualize, it asks only this: can you love what is, while still opening to what wishes to become? That question does not lead to striving, it leads to the most sacred balance of all, one where you rest fully in the end, and yet remain infinitely open to a life that will always exceed even your most beautiful assumption. To love what is, while remaining open to what wishes to become. This is the delicate harmony of the awakened soul. It is not resignation, it is not passive waiting, it is the most fertile stillness, a state where you no longer resist the moment, and yet you are not bound by it. You stand in the center of a holy paradox, full acceptance, and complete permission for change. Most cannot dwell here long, for the old self was trained to believe that contentment ends creation, that peace is the death of progress. But you now see the deeper law. Peace is not the end of becoming, it is the beginning of it. From rest comes expansion, from stillness comes movement, from surrender comes power. You no longer chase what's next, nor do you shrink from what is. You receive the present moment, like sacred ground, knowing it contains the seed of all that follows, and you bless it, even if it bears no resemblance to what you've imagined. You no longer say, this should not be. You say this too is part of the unfolding. You no longer divide your experience into right and wrong, delay and reward. You see it all as preparation, wholly hidden, perfect in timing. This is what it means to live in the end, not to ignore what is, but to rest so deeply in what must be, that the present moment cannot disturb you. You do not deny what appears. You simply no longer take your identity from it. You walk through contradiction with unwavering poise, because your eyes are not fixed on the scene, they are fixed on the state from which the scene must change. And so you dwell in that state, not as a strategy, but as a way of being. You walk as one who has. You breathe as one who knows. You smile as one who no longer measures by the senses. And because your inner world is fixed, the outer must shift. It is law. But now you understand the secret few ever discover. Even manifestation is not the goal, it is the echo, the side effect, the natural fruit of a tree, rooted in right identity. And once you are rooted, the need to hurry disappears. You become timeless, you become vast, and life begins to rise to meet you in ways the old self could never have dreamed, because the old self begged for form, it craved signs, it needed evidence to feel safe. But the reborn self creates safety from within. It needs no outer sign to feel whole, because it carries the knowing that I am is enough. And from that enoughness, all things come, not because you willed them into being, but because you allowed them. You allowed truth to breathe in you. You allowed rest to replace resistance. You allowed your old name to fall like a leaf, so the light beneath could shine. And now the whole world responds, not to your effort, but to your essence. Even the things you once feared begin to soften in your presence. The problem dissolves not because you solved it, but because you no longer give it the power to define you. The need shrinks not because it was fulfilled, but because you stopped identifying as the one who lacked. And here in this deep and gentle reversal, love begins to overflow. Not love that clings, not love that proves, but love that recognizes. You start to see through the veil in others. You notice the spark that they've forgotten. You do not preach. You do not correct. You simply remember for them until they remember for themselves. This is how the divine moves through you now, not only in desire, not only in fulfillment, but in the quiet restoration of all things. And your life becomes not just a testimony of what the law can do, but of who you truly are when you live as the law itself. But even this is not the final unveiling, for beyond the practice, beyond the rest, beyond the radiance of assumption fulfilled, lies something yet deeper still, a realm where identity dissolves into light, where even the desire to manifest begins to vanish, where nothing is missing, and nothing needs to appear, because everything is known as one. And what emerges from that place is not a dream, not a vision, not even a self. It is the remembrance of God as awareness itself, and the invitation to dwell there is waiting in the silence just beyond this breath. There is a silence that does not ask for anything, a silence that is not waiting for change, not listening for confirmation, not longing for the promise. It is full, infinite, without edge or center, and in that silence, something begins to dissolve, so gently, you hardly notice it at first. The self you thought you had become, the new self so carefully assumed, begins to loosen its name, not in loss, but in light. Even the identity of the fulfilled one becomes transparent here. The version of you who lived in the end, who imagined and received, who assumed and became, it too is holy, it too was necessary. But now the form begins to fade into formlessness. What remains is awareness itself. You are not this body, you are not this name, you are not the one who manifests, nor the one who waits, you are not even the one who assumes. You are the witness, the source, the field in which it all arises. And in that realization, a deep and sacred calm washes over you. You no longer need to remember a technique. You no longer need to ask, what do I do, or who must I be? You are still, and the stillness is not empty, it is alive. It is love before motion, peace before appearance, being before expression. This is not a step to practice, it is not a method, it is not something to reach for. It is what has always been true, but hidden beneath the noise of becoming. You are already what you seek.
The image you held was a mirror, lovingly placed before you, to awaken what never slept. And now even that mirror begins to fade. You feel the veil thinning, not because you tore it down, but because you stopped gripping it. You stopped needing form to prove anything. And the moment you ceased trying to bring heaven to earth, you found heaven had always been within. That the place you were striving to reach was the place from which you were creating all along. Here in this high and holy stillness, even desire is quieted, not denied, not dismissed, but embraced into wholeness. It is no longer a reaching toward. It is no longer a reaching toward. It is a knowing within. You no longer feel desire as something to fulfill, but as a frequency to dwell in. The feeling of having is no longer imagined. It is what you are. And so you begin to walk without identity, without story. You begin to speak only when silence wishes to become sound. You begin to love, not from need or virtue, but from recognition. You look at the world, and you see only yourself, disguised as trees and wind, and strangers, and time. There is no other. There is no outside. There is only consciousness, dancing as form, remembering itself again and again, through the eyes of the dreamer. I and the Father are one. The final veil is not between you and the world. It is between you and your own being. And as it falls, you stop acting from the memory of who you once were, and begin living from the light of who you've never not been. There is nothing left to attain, and yet everything flows. There is nothing left to ask for, and yet all is given, because you are no longer imagining to get. You are imagining as God. You are no longer seeking to feel. You are the feeling in motion, and the world ever faithful begins to reflect what cannot be described. A stillness too deep to define, a presence that changes the air, a vibration that requires no introduction. You are the atmosphere now, the current, the hum behind the appearance, and everywhere you go, things begin to unfold, not by force, but by resonance. And even now, even in this fullness, something stirs in the silence, a final gesture of grace, ready to rise from within, not to give you more, but to give itself as you. It comes without form, without sound, only a sense, a presence, a warmth behind the breath, asking nothing, offering everything. And the question it carries cannot be answered in words, only with surrender, only with stillness, only with love so complete. It no longer remembers what it means to wait. It waits behind your breath, gentle as a dawn, not yet visible, not a voice, but a presence, not a question, but a quiet invitation. It asks for nothing and yet changes everything. It does not push, it does not promise, it simply is. And in its presence, even your deepest assumptions begin to soften, not because they were wrong, but because you no longer need them. You have moved beyond the shape of belief into the sea of being. This is the place where waiting dissolves, where the future folds into the present, and the present returns to the eternal. Here the law still holds, but you no longer use it. It uses you, not as a tool, not as a method, but as the natural outflow of your awareness. You breathe, and the world breathes with you. You rest and form begins to align itself to your stillness. You are not trying to manifest anymore. You are not holding the seam, or repeating the phrase. The gardener is no longer digging the soil. The seed is already planted, and the roots grow downward without effort, without sight, guided by something older than the sun. You are the root now. You are the deep. And in this depth, creation is no longer something you do. It is what you are. You walk not to arrive, but to radiate. You speak not to explain, but to carry vibration. And that vibration reaches beyond language. It carries with it remembrance, a kind of remembering that needs no words, only presence. To those still bound in the dream, it will look like peace. It will feel like comfort. It will seem like wisdom. But to you it is simply what happens when nothing remains but love. Not the love that reaches, not the love that wants, but the love that sees. You look at life now, with open eyes and an open heart. The things you once tried to change, you now bless. The people you once judged, you now understand. Even the self you once were, you hold it with tenderness, for it was necessary. It brought you here. It played its role. It broke so something greater could be born. And what was born is not a new version of the old. It is not an upgrade. It is not a refinement. It is the shedding of all layers, the falling away of all masks, until only the light remained. Not a better self, not a higher self, but the self that is not defined by form at all. The I am, unshaped and unbound. Before Abraham was I am. This is the voice that speaks now, not from above, not from without, but from the center of your being, and it speaks not in words, but in presence. It does not instruct, it is instruction. It does not call you to action, it is the action unfolding itself through you as quiet alignment. And now the world bends to your stillness, not because you commanded it, but because it recognizes its source in you. The wind shifts, the doors open, the timing becomes perfect, not because you planned it, because you surrendered to the rhythm that was always you. You feel it now. You are not waiting for the next chapter. You are the page turning. You are not hoping for signs. You are the sign. You are not watching for confirmation. You are the vibration to which all things respond. And yet there is no pride here, no performance, no seeking of results, just presence, just the sweetness of letting go, just the quiet joy of being nothing in particular, and therefore everything at once. This is why the old self had to die, not as punishment, not even as passage, but as revelation, so that through its undoing, you might finally touch the one who was never born, and can never die, the one who does not wait, the one who does not want, the one who is. But the mystery is not yet done, for even now, in this completeness, something stirs, something not of need, nor of form, a sacred movement from within, rising without urgency, whispering, now that you have become the light, will you let it shine, not just for you, but through you? And as that question breathes through you, something ancient awakens, not in the mind, not in the body, but in the quiet behind both, a remembrance so deep, it does not need language. You feel it more than you know it, a gentle radiance at the center of being, asking nothing of you, and yet ready to pour itself through you, without This is not a doing, this is not a giving, in the way the world gives. It is not service from depletion, it is not action from obligation, it is overflow. It is the river returning to its source, and discovering it was the source all along. It is the sun shining without effort, not for approval, not for return, but because that is its nature. When you no longer need to become, you become. When you no longer try to inspire, you inspire. When you have died to the idea of self, the true self moves freely, not limited by personality or past, not defined by what it owns or achieves, but expressing like light, through clear glass, pure, warm, unfiltered. You begin to feel what it means to be transparent to the divine. You no longer block, you no longer brace, and you are no longer a self, protecting itself from life. You are life itself, flowing, and in that flow, people find healing, not because you give them anything, but because your presence reminds them of their own wholeness. This is the invisible ministry, not the stage, not the spotlight, but the quiet restoration of atmosphere wherever you are, a softening, a lifting, a shift in tone, in pace, in presence. Because where you are, God is known, and where God is known, the impossible becomes ordinary, and yet you take no credit, not because of false humility, but because the you who once claimed and performed is gone. The branch no longer boasts of the fruit, it simply abides, and the fruit appears. I am the vine, ye are the branches, and in this union, there is no more striving, there is only flow. You are no longer trying to teach the law. You are the law, in motion, in silence, in stillness. You no longer need to persuade. Your life speaks before your words do, and your words, when they come, are few, but they carry the weight of reality itself. Even time seems different now. You feel it stretch and soften, bending gently around your awareness. Days no longer race by. Moments unfold like petals. You are not behind. You are not late. You are perfectly placed within the unfolding of all things, as if the rhythm of heaven beats now in your chest. You walk through the world like a secret. The world forgot it knew, and when others meet you, something in them stirs, not because of what you say, but because of what you no longer carry. You no longer hold tension. You no longer grasp. You no longer grasp, you no longer try, and that absence creates a presence, so open, so inviting, that even the most hardened hearts feel safe enough to soften. This is the light shining through, not from effort, not from belief, but from being, and the more you allow it, the more it multiplies, not in fanfare, not in flashes, but in subtle, sacred alignments, words spoken at the perfect moment, encounters you did not plan, answers you did not ask for, doors that open before you knock. And yet, in this great ease, the question returns, whispered now, not from above, but from the very depths of your own being. Will you be the vessel, not for your sake, but for the world that waits for its own reflection in you? It is not a question of duty. It is not even a question. It is a pulse, a knowing, a divine hum, beneath every heartbeat. It asks not for your sacrifice, but your transparency, not for your effort, but your surrender. For in dying to your self-concept, you have become available for the light to pass through, untouched. And now, that light begins to move. It begins to fall, not just as peace within, but as living manifestations without, not to fulfill you, but to reveal what fulfillment looks like when God remembers himself as you.
And so it begins, not as a flash, not as a trumpet blast, but as a soft rearrangement of the air around you, an ease where there once was resistance, a gentle unfolding where striving once stood. The world, once so dense and unmoving, begins to shimmer with responsiveness, not because the outer changed first, but because the inner ceased to doubt. The light that moves through you is not striving to impress, not seeking to acquire. It simply expresses, like breath exhaling into form, like ripples forming from the still point of awareness. And that still point, you now know, is the I am, no longer hidden, no longer separate, not a power to invoke, but the power that is. And in this radiant allowing, things begin to manifest, not with urgency, but inevitability. The thing you once chased now finds you, clothed in peace, softened by time. It arrives as if it was always yours, because it was, because you never had to earn it, you only had to remember it. This is the divine paradox. The moment you no longer need to see it in the world must show it, not to convince you, but to mirror the stillness that now holds no doubt. You no longer wait for the appearance to validate the state. The state is, and the appearance responds. You do not command by force, but by identity. And that identity no longer argues with the world. It rests, and in resting, it reigns. The lion lies down with the lamb within you, and the war ends. This is dominion through remembrance, not domination through effort. For consciousness is the only cause, and consciousness assumed is reality begun. Be still, and know that I am God, not the God of thunder or distance, but the God that is your own imagination. And imagination is not the faculty of fantasy. It is the womb of creation. It is the place where form is conceived in silence, and carried in assumption, until it is born in time. And just as a woman does not question daily whether the child is growing, you no longer question whether the state is working. You live from the end, and so the end begins to live through you. In tone, in timing, in tiny divine winks that whisper, you are the operant power. You smile, not because the thing has arrived, but because you know it must. You breathe, not because you are trying to believe, but because belief has dissolved into being. You walk not in hope, but in holy memory, the memory of already having. And as you move through the world like this, people notice something. They cannot name it. They may call it grace, or confidence, or magnetism, but you know what it is. It is inner union, the collapse of inner division, the alignment of seen and unseen through a self that no longer separates. And because of this alignment, even your old memories begin to shift, not by will, but by resonance. What was once painful becomes soft. What once defined you no longer binds you. You feel the past rewriting itself through the lens of who you are now. You feel your story rethreading itself, not to change what happened, but to reveal what it always meant. You realize that nothing was ever wasted. Every detour was a disguised arrival. Every delay was a divine breath in the soil. Even the heartbreaks became altars for the greater self to rise. For what else could crack the shell of the false identity? What else could lead you here, to the quiet knowing that has no opposite? This is what it means to die to the old self, not to destroy it, not to fight it, but to let it be outgrown, to let it fade like a dream remembered too long, and in its place, not a new version of you, but the original you, the I am that was never born and will never pass. And now from that eternal place, a new desire begins to shimmer, not a desire born of lack, but one born of wholeness, a sacred curiosity, a creative impulse rising not to fix, but to express, a joy not in getting, but in becoming visible as love in form. And so you feel it, like a whisper behind the heart. What if the next unfolding isn't for you to receive, but for you to radiate? What if the next manifestation is not what comes to you, but what shines through you? And as that question settles like light upon still water, something sacred begins to ripple through your being, a new kind of movement, not reaching, not asking, but radiating. It does not begin in thought, it does not arise from strategy, It comes as a warmth behind the ribs, a gentle expansion that requires no reason, love becoming form, essence spilling into expression. You are no longer the seeker, you are the sender. You are no longer seeker, you are the sender. You are no longer chasing the light, you are the window through which it shines. And the desire that once burned with urgency now glows with grace, for it no longer claims something is missing. It reveals that something has already arrived, in you, as you. This is the shift the old self could never understand, for the old self lived in equations. If I feel this, I'll get that. If I think right, it will appear. But here you have moved beyond transaction into transfiguration. You do not desire to get, you desire to give expression to the fullness you are already remembering. This is not the end of manifestation, it is the beginning of divine embodiment. You are no longer imagining scenes only to satisfy the self. You are imagining from the knowing that you are the divine in disguise, and your assumptions are not wishes. They are creations wrapped in faith, alive in their own timing. And because of this, your assumptions are no longer fragile. They do not need proof. They are not urgent. They are not held by tension or repetition. They are breathed once, with reverence, and left to bloom. You plant the seed and walk away, not in disinterest, but in sacred certainty. You do not dig it up to check for roots. You do not beg the sky to send rain. You know that the God who imagined it through you is the same God who sustains it within you, and God never forgets what he plants. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, and the kingdom is not a place, it is not a throne, or a future reward. It is the consciousness of already having. It is the end lived from now. It is the peace that comes not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer waiting to feel complete. This is the hidden treasure buried in the field of your being, and now that you've uncovered it, you begin to live from a strange and holy knowing, that even your desires were never random, they were never mere preferences, they were maps to your true self, folded in longing, waiting for the day you would realize, you are the source of all you seek, and so you begin to allow yourself to want again, not from lack, but from liberty, not because you need it, but because you are free to imagine, free to create, free to dance in the dream, knowing it is dreamt by the divine. Even the smallest preference becomes sacred now. The color you choose, the music you play, the words you whisper to yourself in the quiet, they are no longer trivial. They are spells spoken by God, rituals of remembrance. You are not performing reality. You are composing it like a song you already know by heart. And yet, something deeper stirs beneath all of this beauty. Not a contradiction, but a silence underneath the sound. It hums without melody, it pulses without rhythm, it is the being before the breath, and it asks not for more light, but for deeper transparency. It asks, will you allow this light to move without resistance, even if it leads you where your mind never planned, even if it dissolves the last structure your ego wished to keep? Will you let the light have its way, not just around you, not just for you, but through you, for the world? You do not need to answer in words. The answer will reveal itself in how open your heart remains, in how softly you walk, in how little you need to prove, in how quickly you forgive, in how quickly you forgive, in how tenderly you respond when nothing outside seems to justify such grace. Because this is what it means to be reborn, not to be given a new self to protect, but to become a clear vessel through which the eternal self flows, without end, without fear, without pause. And even as the vessel clears, as all resistance begins to melt into that luminous silence, a new kind of question emerges, not from the mind, but from the depth that remains, when all mind-made identities dissolve. It is not curiosity in the way you once knew it. It is not about what comes next. It is an ache, sacred and wordless, to give yourself entirely to what you now are, not to hold it, not to use it, but to disappear into it. To be fully possessed by the presence you once pursued. The old self would tremble here, for this is not a path of gaining, but of giving up the illusion that there was ever anything to gain. Here you do not step forward, as a better version of the person you once were. Here the person dissolves, and what remains is being. The stillness that now governs you does not freeze you. It animates you in ways the old self could never imagine. You are no longer choosing based on consequence, but flowing from alignment. You no longer ask, what should I do? But rather, what is most true for what I now know myself to be? This is the divine rhythm, not a plan you must follow, but a pulse that moves through you, timeless and indivisible, like the tide returning home. You feel it now in the smallest gestures, in the way your hands touch the world, in how you pause before speaking, in how you bless with your glance, without saying a word. The world responds not to your effort,
but to your resonance. You have become the tuning fork for a higher octave of reality, and because of this, the forms of life begin to rearrange themselves without your grasp. The people, the provisions, the paths, they do not come as prizes, they come as recognition. Life sees what you have become, and reflects it. You don't need to prove your worth. Your state is your proof. You don't need to convince anyone of your truth. The truth when lived requires no defense. It's here, in this state of full spiritual maturity, that true abundance begins, not just financially, though that too may rise, but a deeper richness, a soul wealth, a sufficiency so vast, even the appearance of lack becomes an opportunity to give, and you will give, not to fulfill a duty, not to earn a return, but because the light within you overflows. It spills, not from obligation, but from inevitability, and what spills from you becomes the healing another forgot was possible. It may be your words, it may be your silence, it may be your walk, your art, your laughter. It doesn't matter. The form is not the miracle. You are, and through you, the light dresses itself in 1,000 expressions of mercy. This is where you realize the purpose of death was never destruction, it was transformation. What died was not your power, but the illusion that you had to protect it. What died was not your worth, but the false belief that it needed to be earned. What died was not yourself, but the veil that kept you from seeing you had never been separate from God. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. What a mystery, to be dead to the world, yet more alive than ever, to be unseen by the outer, yet known by the inner, as eternal presence, to walk through the dream of separation, while resting in the certainty of union. And now the dream becomes play, not the avoidance of pain, but the transmutation of it, not the clinging to things, but the honoring of them. You love not to possess, you love because you are love, and to express it is to extend your being into form, and even that, you hold lightly, for what is expressed returns to the unexpressed. What is formed melts into formlessness again, and in this sacred dance, you discover something most never touch, that even your most cherished manifestations are not the treasure. The treasure is you. The treasure is this knowing. The treasure is this deathless awareness, that watches all things arise and pass, yet remains unmoved, untouched, and free. And as this realization settles into every cell, every breath, every thought, a question surfaces, not from lack, but from sacred readiness. If I no longer need to become, what else might be possible, simply because I now remember that I already am? And as that question breathes through you, not from the lips but from the soul, you begin to sense a new horizon forming, not ahead of you, but within you. It is not a destination you walk toward, but a dimension that unfolds as you remember. The more you surrender the need to become, the more reality bends to the shape of your being. It is not becoming, it is unveiling. You begin to feel the invisible architecture of the kingdom, not as a place or reward, but as a state, a rhythm, a texture, a fragrance behind perception. And from this state, what once felt miraculous now feels natural. What once seemed like a breakthrough now feels like recognition. There is no struggle in it, no effort, only divine correspondence between what you are and what appears. This is the truth hidden beneath all striving. The outer cannot exceed the inner. It mirrors the depth of your assumption. And now that assumption no longer comes from will, but from rest. You are no longer asking if it will come. You are no longer performing belief. You are dwelling in identity. You see it clearly now. The old self tried to convince, tried to persuade the invisible through repetition and force, but persuasion was never needed, only acceptance. The old self wanted proof to feel secure, but the new self, this radiant, eternal self, feels secure, and lets the proof come, if it must, in its own time. This is why the death was essential, not to erase what you were, but to release what you are not. You are not the one who waits. You are not the one who waits. You are not the one who doubts. You are not the one who asks, how long? You are the one who knows, and that knowing itself is the seed. That knowing itself is the form in its invisible stage. Every moment you dwell in the end dwells in you. Every moment you feel the wish fulfilled, the wish becomes flesh. Before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. This is not poetry, it is law. It is the law of consciousness becoming visible through surrender. You begin to understand the sacred irony. The more deeply you rest in the end, the less you care how it arrives. The joy is not in the thing, the joy is in the union. The state is the reward, the feeling is the fulfillment, the assumption is the answer. And yet the world does respond, in ways so effortless, so precise. It humbles you, not because you forced it, but because you finally allowed it. You walk into rooms you once feared. You meet eyes you once avoided. You speak words once trapped behind old definitions of self. And the world, seeing this new light behind your gaze, begins to treat you as you have always deserved. Not because they have changed, but because you no longer forget who you are. Even when circumstances temporarily disguise themselves as lack, you are unmoved, for you now know that appearances are echoes, not causes. They are shadows, not substance. They follow state, they do not create it. And when the echo comes, a bill, a silence, a delay, you no longer flinch. You do not pray out of panic. You assume out of peace. You return within, and feel it done, and you leave it there. This is mastery. This is the throne, not of ego, but of awareness. You may find yourself speaking less, needing less, demanding less, not out of withdrawal, but out of abundance. You are full now, full not of things, but of being, full not of stories, but of stillness. And the stillness speaks more powerfully than noise ever could. The world may not understand. Some may question your calm, misread your silence, wonder at your joy, but their questions do not concern you, for you now walk with God, not above the world, but in it, as one who remembers what the world forgot. And so the question no longer is, what will I manifest? But rather, what sacred expression will I embody today, simply because I am? And in that question lives a still deeper invitation, one that will reshape your entire understanding of faith, of creation, of self, one that whispers now through the silence. What if everything you call outside is simply your own being, speaking back to you in form? And as that whisper stretches through the silence, a truth deeper than sound begins to unfurl within you. What you once called reality no longer sits outside you. It no longer approaches from some far distance, begging to be earned or invited. You begin to feel it instead as a language your own consciousness has always been speaking to itself, translated into people, places, and events. There is no other. There is only self appearing as form. And this too is part of the death of duality, the death of object and subject, seeker and sought. For as long as you believe something must come to you, you delay the realization that it is already within you, waiting to be claimed, not chased. Call those things which be not as though they were. Why? Because they already are. In consciousness there is no delay. There is no distance between the seed and the tree, between the word and its becoming. There is only acceptance. There is only occupancy. And so as you walk through the mirror of this world, you no longer ask, what is this showing me? In the tone of confusion, you ask it as a priest would, interpreting the sacred dance of symbols. What aspect of myself is this moment revealing? What inner altar must be touched? Nothing happens outside your assumption, not even the delay, not even the resistance. It is all echo. And because you now know this, you no longer fight shadows. You shift the light within. You no longer sculpt the mirror. You soften the face. The old self would call this denial, but the new self knows it is dominion, not over others, but over self-perception. You are not escaping what is. You are declaring what always was, and letting it rise into view. There is such calm in this, such still dignity, such quiet boldness. You no longer react like one who's been threatened. You respond like one who's been crowned, not because you now wear some invisible armor, but because you've remembered the throne was always within. This is the peace that passes understanding. It isn't logical. It doesn't make sense to the old mind. It surpasses understanding because it precedes it. It comes not after you figure things out, but before, as the grace that makes sense irrelevant. And from this peace, assumption becomes an act of love, not demand, not pressure, but love. You no longer assume just to get. You assume to reflect your true nature. You assume because that is what God does. Let there be light, and there was. No argument, no debate, no evidence, just knowing, and so it was. You are made in that same image, not in flesh and blood, but in creative power. And now, as that power moves through you without obstruction, you do not fear what you used to call delay. You do not tremble at appearances. You do not beg the world to respond. You assume it is done, and then you live as if it is done, not to force it into form, but because that is your new nature, that is your temple, that is your truth. And even if nothing changed around you today, you would still walk in the fullness of your assumption, not because of stubbornness, but because of sovereignty. You know that your faith is not a gamble, it is not hoping, it is claiming. And when the world tries to contradict you, through headlines, through voices, through echoes of your old self. You smile, not with superiority, but with clarity. You know that those images are fading, that they are ghosts of a self already gone. You bless them, but you do not serve them. You serve only what is true, and what is true is what you choose to embody now, in silence, in stillness, in secret. For what is done in secret is rewarded openly. The world cannot help but respond to who you've become. It has no will apart from yours. It has no voice except your inner world. And so you begin to wonder, as if for the first time, if everything that appears is the echo of what I accept, then what song shall I sing now? Not with lips but with being. And as that question lingers like incense in the temple of your heart, you realize it was never meant to be answered with words. It is answered in vibration, in the quiet music of your state, in the way your breath aligns with the rhythm of creation itself. For to sing with being is to let your inner atmosphere speak louder than form, louder than facts, louder than fear. You are no longer a seeker, nor a student, nor even a teacher. You are the Word made flesh. You are the light remembering its own source. And every moment you live from this realization, the world around you begins to bow, not to your ego, but to the holy fire that now burns without smoke, without noise, without effort. What once felt like discipline is now delight. What once demanded belief now feels like breath. The law no longer feels like a practice. It feels like who you are. And the more you dwell in this, the more gently the old scaffolding falls away. Not in protest, but in praise. For even your past begins to serve you, not as weight, but as witness. You see now that every shadow had its place. Every fall was a folding inward. Every closed door was a redirection to the only place that ever held power within. The death of the old self was not cruelty. It was mercy. It was grace disguised as loss. The grave you feared became the womb of your becoming. For unless a grain of wheat fall into the earth and die, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The seed does not mourn what it was. It surrenders to the soil, knowing its form must vanish to reveal its truth. And now, beloved, you are that truth, not becoming it, being it. You walk through the same world, but everything is changed, because you are changed, not with effort, not with battle, but with the holy simplicity of remembrance. You have remembered what cannot be taught. You have returned to what was never absent, and you are crowned with peace, not because all is perfect in form, but because you are perfect in state. Even your desires feel different now. They are not grasping, they are not hungry, they are quiet invitations from the deeper self, gently calling you to express more of what you already are. You do not pursue them, you reveal them, and when they come, you receive them without surprise, for they are no longer miracles, they are reflections. There is no fanfare in this, no trumpet, no parade, just the quiet radiance of one who no longer needs to explain, no longer needs to prove. You are content in the silence, because the silence is full, and in that fullness, life continues to move, not with chaos, but with choreography, every moment orchestrated, every meeting divine, every delay a gift. You no longer try to make things happen. You abide, you remain, you dwell, you let things come, not as favors, but as fulfillments. For what you desire is already yours, and what is yours cannot pass you by. The law has seen to it, consciousness has claimed it, and now, as you sit in the final stillness of this unfolding, feel how deeply you've been changed, not by learning, but by letting go, not by adding to yourself, but by dying to all that you were not. You are not the old stories, you are not the former patterns, you are not the waiting, the wanting or the wound. You are life, awakened to itself. You are God, in remembrance. You are the dreamer, no longer trapped in the dream, but shaping it, with every silent assumption, every imagined end, every sacred state. And so, beloved, sleep tonight in peace. Sleep not to escape, but to commune. Let the inner chambers of your mind become holy ground. Let the dream be your altar. Let the silence wrap you like a robe of light. For you have died the death that brings light. You have left behind what was never yours, and in its place, you have remembered the only thing that ever was, ever is, and ever shall be. I am